Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. First video in quite a while. Uh, I didn't really mean to take a break, but I was trying to kind of clear myself of some of the political stuff that I was talking about for so long, especially with regards to a lot of the current events that are going on. So right now I'm trying to, well, trying but failing somewhat to get out of the current events, but it's people are pulling me back in, and I'm pulling myself back in, unfortunately, as well. Probably mainly my fault. Anyway, so I thought I'd do this video today about the impact of the band Nirvana, and are they? The question is if they're overrated uh, as far as the musical field of everything that's happened with regards to music. So I'm going to give you a little context about what, you know, as far as my conclusion with this. So basically, the late 80s, early 90s were an interesting time. And you had, it's about 1987, 88. Things were starting to shift pretty much in 88 with regards to the musical landscape. Like one of the top 10 hits was Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, was kind of like this pseudo pop jam, or not jam band kind of thing. They had a hit. You had some minor Red Hot Chili Peppers hits as well at the time. Jane's Addiction was getting started, and there was this show called 120 Minutes on MTV that was getting kind of popular, along coinciding with Headbangers Ball, as far as those two things. And some bands actually were on both because you didn't know what to call, say, Ministry heavy metal or alternative back then. Of course, they're kind of industrial metal, so but whatever. So you had this musical environment that was pretty. It was getting to be something different that was before. You had all these hair metal bands, including hair metal bands. All these hair metal bands. I mean, this is classic album from like 5 years before, but 4 or 5 years before. But you had all these hair metal bands, just these clones of clones coming out that were honestly not that great. It really got really oversaturated, and it was pretty ubiquitous. And at the same time, thrash metal was getting popular in the metal scene. I remember a lot of these magazines coming out. See, I've been in metal since I was actually a kid, literally. So I was reading magazines at the grocery store and stuff when I was, 10, 11 years old to, like 11, 12 years old at the, at the onset of the alternative thing and stuff. And, the metal magazines were talking about a lot about thrash, and these thrash bands would like have these thrash fans would have these zines. You could look up what zines are if you're of the younger generation and don't know. But like these Xerox things, they had some derogatory things to say about the glam bands. There was one called, pardon the expression, "No Glam Fags," was one of them. Because I guess for some reason, even though the irony is that glam bands were some of the most heterosexual bands in the world as far as their, how many women they had sex with and just how everything was. There was this weird impression that they were gay or something because they dressed sort of feminine or whatever. And I know a lot of the 70s glam rockers were actually gay or bi, but anyways, enough on that statement. It just was a common thing to say about hair metal and stuff back then, that they were gay, whatever. But it's fine, It's just, in retrospect, it's silly to think about that when you look at the actual, sausage fest that thrash was in comparison to hair metal. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So all this stuff was happening, and there was some other stuff happening too. So around 1988, 89, the first Living Color album came out, and this is kind of an interesting little side note. What was that band called? The first band with Tom Morello, and I think it's called Lock Up, not to be confused with the death metal Lock Up band. They came around, and I was watching their video because it reminded me like Chili Peppers meets like Living Color as far as like the vibe and sound, with complete with some shred from Tom Morello. He didn't really shred as much in the same way with Rage Against the Machine. You know, these bands. Actually, my friend had this weird thing called ethnic rock. Maybe it's kind of fucking horrible to say that, but like they would wear these like zebra pants and like all these like white guys would wear like these African hats and shit. Like I think in that Lockup video, the guy was wearing that. Just all this weird shit. Like they would incorporate all this stuff. This was happening in the late '80s. And I'm going to build up to this Nirvana thing. It's going to seem like it pays off. Trust me. So we had all these bands coming out, and there was also like what was happening in the some of these hair metal guys, were doing these solo albums or these projects. Like Jake E. Lee did Badlands, and George Lynch did Lynch Mob, which he renamed. Actually, that was a pretty tasteless name, but his last name is Lynch. But it is a tasteless name. I'll give him that. He renamed it recently, actually. So there were more bluesy kind of bands that they were doing, like after years of shredding, you know, like Jake E. Lee with Ozzy and George Lynch with Dokken, respectively. And their first albums came out, you know, 88, 89, and there was kind of a return to the earthiness of the 70s and even the 60s to some extent. In the late, it was a zeitgeist that was in the air. So there was something going on, and you know, you had Iron Maiden in 1990 did No Prayer for the Dying, where they stripped everything down. You know, the stage was stripped down. They wore jeans and a t-shirt and leather jackets. They weren't wearing spandex, fucking striped spandex shorts or pants anymore. Eddie wasn't as big and all this stuff. So there was something in the air. It was happening. I'll give you a little other indication of this. So my brother, my older brother, he was 7 years my senior. In the late 80s, actually I think it was 89 or 90, I think it might have been 90, he started dating this girl that actually was in college, because he was actually a high school dropout. Rest in peace, my brother. And he's like, oh, I'm getting into these new bands, like, I don't think the Pogues was one of them, maybe. Oh, like the Dead Milkmen, which is kind of weird, but because it kind of made fun of the type of person my brother was at the time, with their song Bitchin' Camaro, which he almost like half ironically appropriated, because he had a Camaro for a while. He bought for $500, pretty crazy. And he had his cat in there and shit too. Anyways, I'm going off the tangent again. He's like, oh, I like this band, Jane's Addiction. You know, I don't know about some of the new Judas Priest albums. A little juvenile for me. I'm getting into some of these other bands like Jane's Addiction and Red Hot Chili Peppers and all this shit. So this was happening at the time. A lot of people were kind of getting sick of the excess of the 80s. And you had this burgeoning movement in the underground with all these types of bands, like indie rock, you know, punk and everything, SST Records and all these other labels. And this band, the band Nirvana came around, and in 1991 they had their hit "Smells Like Teen Spirit," which caused, you know, the crash of hair metal, and as a casualty of war, they also caused a lot of the better bands to, or my thumb, where is it going? The better bands to also kind of go down in sales and everything, and be seen as dated. And it was a huge cultural revolution in the early 90s with grunge. And at the time, you know, I don't know, I liked it because I liked Soundgarden, and there was this famous tour that I missed with Soundgarden, Faith No More, and Voivod, which I would have loved to catch. It was 1990, but I was like a little kid. I think I asked someone to go, but you know, someone to take me, but I never got to go. But that would have been an awesome historical event to go to. But it was in the air. You know, these bands were already kind of, you know, some of them were getting scouted by major labels, and they were just, it was becoming a thing. So when Nirvana broke, as they call it, you know, they broke through the industry with their Nevermind album, it caused a huge ruckus, amongst the music scene. So, but it was kind of something that was being built up to. Like I said, it wasn't something that just happened and everything else came forward from it. It was kind of something that was already being, developed in the public consciousness at the time. I think people were sick of Gailey and Kruger amps and guitar amps, which I own. Actually, I get only a Gailey and Kruger amp. Very 80s sounding. Boss Rock, or not Boss, rock, Scholl's Rockmans and gated reverb drums and synthesizers. They wanted something more earthy and more down to earth. That was just the zeitgeist that was going on. So when Nirvana broke, it was kind of a culmination of all that stuff. Really, it wasn't really something that. It was something that was being built up to, for the most part. So when they broke, I actually, some of my friends got into it before I did, like a couple, maybe like half a year. And I dubbed the tape from my friend, Nevermind, the album Nevermind. And I liked it because I was already a fan of punk and 70s rock and metal. So, being as a lot of grunge was kind of a mixture of a lot of different, these elements, I quite liked it. I didn't like it as much as, some of the other stuff I like, but I definitely dug it, And then, really what peaked with me with Nirvana was Incesticide. Even though it's B-sides and all these unreleased songs and all this stuff and, covers and stuff, I thought that album had the best balance of accessibility and I guess you'd call it heaviness. I don't know. Or, being extreme. That was my favorite one. I bought Bleach on vinyl early on too, which is pretty interesting. I wonder if that would have been worth something today. I think it was the red vinyl. I'm not sure. But In Utero came out, and I didn't really care as much by then about Nirvana. But I never thought they were overrated. I think it wasn't their fault that the zeitgeist chose them as the forebearers of this whole thing. And they didn't really care. They just were doing what they did. So when people call them overrated, I think that they weren't overrated because they influenced so many people in good and bad ways. Just like my Pantera video when I said, Pantera influenced people in good ways and bad ways, but Nirvana did the same. So you can't hear an album or a song on the radio on these solid rock, hard rock, metal stations around the country, being the United States, you can't hear an hour without hearing not a Nirvana song necessarily, but a song by a band that is influenced by their dynamics, like soft, heavy kind of stuff that they did, even though the Pixies and countless other bands did it before, and who influenced Nirvana. But you can't really listen to a lot of modern rock without hearing some of that kind of Kurt Cobain snarl, or some of that, Mesa Boogie amp, grind that it has. A lot of, just so many bands have been influenced by that over the years. Most of them suck, don't get me wrong. And they were missing a lot of the magic that Nirvana gave to it. And it's really, I can't really, explain why they had it then other bands didn't. But I recently got it, so this kind of is related. I checked out this band. I got the CD by this band called True Widow, and I was listening to the college radio station. It wasn't grunge, I know they're not grunge, but some of these types of bands like that have this feel that I think Nirvana, bands that copy Nirvana don't have that feel. It's like this indie kind of earnestness, you call it. It's you listen to a lot of new metal and u-metal and post-grunge, and it has this almost pretentiousness that Nirvana never had. It has this weird, artificial, contrived bullshit manner of playing and writing music that they never had. So, all in all, I think Nirvana were a torchbearers of a generation in a lot of ways, being Generation X. I don't think that there's you can't really deny their cultural impact on people, and just even though that maybe they're them as a band just were the front men for this whole movement, and there might have been more uh, arguably or objectively talented people involved in grunge and alternative rock, but Nirvana were kind of just the symbols of this revolution that happened. Now, I have mixed feelings about the revolution that happened and resulted. Obviously, if I'm wearing a fucking rat shirt and I have a Judas Priest poster on my wall, and God knows what, all sorts of stuff, I have mixed feelings about the Nirvana thing, or not the Nirvana thing, but the grunge revolution. So, I mean, I used to listen to Iron Maiden, and then listen to Soundgarden. I didn't care. Or then listen to Black Flag or Sam Hain, all in one sitting. I didn't give a shit. And maybe even listen to like Pink Floyd or something. See, that was the problem I had, and I have with all musical zeitgeists, so to speak. It's like the hair metal thing took over, and you couldn't play punky music and on a major. I mean, no, not a major label, but like arena rock. You wouldn't have a band that played alternative rock headline an arena in 1984. But then in 1994, you wouldn't have a band that played arena rock or AOR or hair metal headline an arena either. So that's the problem. Why not room for both styles or both approaches? I've always liked, like I said, I was kind of a punk metaler growing up. So I got the Suicidal Tendencies album. Not Join the Army, but actually the 12-inch Possessed Escape. That was the first punk album I got, and it had the Join the Army poster, which I'd seen in their video, How I Laugh Tomorrow. So I put up the poster right away. And I even banged my head against the wall a little bit one time too, because of in the video. So I was always into metal and punk, and arguably arena rock or alternative or whatever. In some ways, I grew up with alternative. With siblings, my other sibling, my sister. So I had a lot of different things growing up. So I hated the ubiquitousness of any kind of style that takes over. Just like right now with metal, all this gent and metalcore and whatever post metal stuff. I'm trying to check out more bands. Like that True Widow CD, and I'm listening to a lot of. I think I listen to more synth. I bought more synthwave albums over the past few years than actual metal albums, but I'm checking some new stuff out, and I do like a lot. I do like some new stuff, and as far as new power metal stuff, well, I controversially love the band Beast in Black, but that's another story for another time. So, do I think Nirvana were overrated? I guess as a band, if you want to objectively say that, all the praise that they've gotten, yes. But in the middle of a movement that was just sweeping the world as far as alternative rock and everything else, no, absolutely not. They were just chosen as the front men for the movement, and things were changing. People were becoming more socially conscious. I'll use that as a loaded term, of course, and more politically correct. I remember all the Motley Crue or Rat videos with the girls with their tops, and stuff. All of a sudden, that was just taboo after the grunge revolution. We got to respect women. They have to, some of these bands could have been nailing groupies and putting rails of coke on their tits or whatever after shows, but they would never tell the media they were doing that. Some of these grunge bands, I doubt a lot of them were, but I'm just saying that could have been the case. But did the '80s have to die? Yeah, it always follows a trajectory. You have to, if things are, I'll just give you a little taste of what it was like as far as growing up in the late '80s, early '90s, watching Headbangers Ball. So if you were a fan of heavy metal, as I was, and I was not into hair metal back then, by the way. I think I liked Great White's album. I went to their show, and Tesla blew him off the stage. Liked a couple things. I liked Van Halen, and later on I liked Kiss and stuff. I don't know if you count that as hair metal, but probably not. But hair metal actually took me a long time to get into, because I'll go into that story in another video. But He sat through the Headbangers Ball, and Ricky Rackman would just sit there like, here's Tough's new single, you know, or Enough's Enough's not that bad, but here's Steelheart's newest album, and you would sit there and you'd just be like, oh, not again, not more of this stuff. And then finally, at like 1:30 a.m., when you're really like just, you've had like, you know, I used to drink like cans of Pepsi, you know, and just like stay up all night. But I'm like, oh, when's it gonna be a good song? Oh, Voivod! Oh, finally, you know, Clouds in My House is on. You know, you have to sit through that, just the barrage of all these third and fourth wave, second tier, third tier, 10th tier, 1000th tier hair metal bands. So Nirvana coming around and just killing that overnight, literally, it wasn't overnight, as I said, but overnight, so to speak, was a welcome change. But the pendulum swung too far in the other direction. You know, I tried to form bands like in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was, you know, becoming a, you know, late teenager, early adult. And it was just like, oh, well, we don't play guitar solos. You know, it was like, it was near impossible to form any type of good band, you know. People didn't know about Blind Guardian or fucking Creator or Emperor or Dream Theater shit. You know, it was really tough. And I blame a lot of that on the grunge alternative revolution. So the pendulum swung too far. There's room for everything in music, you know, in metal or rock. There's room for Rat, and there's room for Husker Du, you know, which I actually liked too. Their Zen Arcade is a great album. I like that a lot. I actually recently rebought that on CD. Really good album. I recommend it. Like a lot of different stuff. I'll listen to fucking Husker Du's Zen Arcade, but I'll listen to Rat, you know. I don't get, you know, I like a lot of shit. So the Nirvana revolution they brought, were Nirvana as a band overrated? Maybe a little bit. So I think their music, though, that had this honesty to it and catchiness that was worth it. You'd get the song stuck in your head. That's what a lot of these post-grunge bands miss. They miss they mix the dryness of nu metal and like the most boring shit, and then they try to put the grunge thing together with that, and it just fails miserably. I'm looking at you, Stained, Nickelback, whatever. I just don't like that shit. But anyways, you know, everybody has a right to like that, you know. It just gets so weird. But Nirvana were not like that. Nirvana was basically a punk band with some pop leanings and some metal influences, especially from 70s metal like Sabbath and stuff. But that's basically what they were. And they got big. And who knows what would have happened if he would have survived Kurt, you know. If he didn't get killed by Courtney Love. No. So who knows what would have happened, because, I mean, he was talking about working with William S. Burroughs again and doing all this weird kind of shit. A weird new Nirvana album that's kind of avant-garde and, you know, goes in all sorts of directions. And it's pretty sad, whatever you believe happened to him. So he seemed like a really intelligent guy. I mean, I would have disagreed with him about a lot of stuff, you know, because he was pretty PC, like, in an extreme direction. You know, you take a person like Vince Neil and, you know, contrast him with Kurt Cobain. I'm probably closer to Kurt Cobain than Vince Neil, but I'm not totally on the Vince Neil. I mean, I'm not totally, you know, off the Vince Neil end. I'm too close. I'm too much on that edge to say I'm definitely on the Kurt side of things, which is weird or whatever you want to consider it. But anyways, I'm rambling on about this, but that's what I think about Nirvana. Please comment and subscribe. I'll be doing way more videos again because I've decided that I want to, and I'll actually be moving pretty soon too. So you'll see a different background in the next couple months, which will be pretty interesting and won't be as cluttered, hopefully, too, because I live in an attic room of my friends that I've been living with for years. So unlike a lot of the naysayers on my Manowar or Danzig videos, I don't live with my mom. I wouldn't live with my mom, you know. I mean, when I have a girlfriend that's loudly moaning, that would be really embarrassing in front of your mom. And with a roommate, it's a little different. But anyways, that's all.